The most dangerous thing a man can do is let a woman underestimate him. I did it on purpose. My name is Robert Hale, and on Friday the 13th of April 2023 she made that mistake. I was sitting at the dining table in our house in Pacific Heights, San Francisco. I took my first sip of coffee. I was still wearing yesterday's shirt. I wasn't reading anything in particular. Just an ordinary morning. A quiet morning. Mildred was already dressed. Her blazer looked like full-body armor. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor. She applied that particular shade of lipstick, the one she only wore for board meetings. She placed a manila envelope on the table right next to my coffee cup. She didn't stop walking. My lawyer drafted something, she said, her eyes still glued to her phone, scrolling mindlessly. I should have handled this from the beginning. I've worked too hard to leave things to chance. I looked at the envelope. The logo of her law firm was printed on the label. It looked too sharp, too prepared. I wasn't surprised that the document existed. I was only surprised she had finally acted. What is this? I asked. Though a quiet part of me, the part that watches and never speaks, already knew the answer. A post-nuptial agreement, she said. She said it the same way someone might say the dry cleaning was ready. Flat, pure logistics. I know the timing isn't ideal, Mildred continued. But we've been married for 2 years, Mildred. That's exactly why we need clarity going forward. Finally, she looked up from her phone. She gave me that smile, the one that never reached her eyes. Take your time reading it. My lawyer is always available if you have questions. She grabbed her handbag and walked straight to the door. No goodbye kiss. She hadn't done that for 7 months. I had counted every single day. The door slammed shut, a sharp pin driven into the silence. I sat there. The envelope sat there with me. 11 pages. Her signature was already on page 9. Her lawyer's business card was clipped to the front, as if this were a real estate transaction, and I was just another party expected to sign and walk away. I read every word. Somewhere around page 6, where my assets were described as unverified and presumed minimal, something changed inside my chest. Not anger. Clarity. Welcome to Dad's real-life revenge. Get comfortable, because this story is going to take you somewhere. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Clarity is a double-edged knife. It cuts away the last illusions about this marriage. Mildred thought she was protecting her empire. What she didn't know was this. She had just signed the death warrant for the very strategy she had spent years building. The San Francisco fog began rolling past the windows. It blurred the view outside, but inside my mind everything became sharp. The game had begun. But this story didn't start on Friday, the 13th of April 2023. It started 3 years earlier. On a Wednesday night in late February of 2020. That was the night Mildred Voss walked into my life. She was wearing a black dress and a smile that probably came with a set of terms and conditions I hadn't bothered to read yet. The event that night was a Stanford alumni gathering in San Francisco. The kind of event where people are either networking or pretending they aren't. I stood near the back right beside the shrimp cocktail table. That's where the practical people usually stand. I sipped a club soda and wondered why I had let my best friend Dave Jason convince me to come. You haven't been out since you sold the company, Dave had said 2 days earlier. You're turning into one of those guys. What guys? I asked. The kind who names their houseplants, Dave replied. I don't have any houseplants, Dave. Exactly, he said. That's even worse. So I went. Navy blazer. No tie. I planned to stay 45 minutes. Shake 3 hands. Then head back to my Pacific Heights apartment and watch something forgettable on TV. But she found me. At least now I know that's what happened. Back on that Wednesday night in 2020. I just thought I'd gotten lucky. You're not playing the game in this room, are you? She said. She appeared beside me as if she had been standing there all along. I glanced around. Neither are you. She laughed. A real laugh. Not the rehearsed kind you usually hear in rooms like that. Touché, she said. Mildred Voss. What do you do, Robert Hale? Here we go. I had been asked that question 40 times a night at events like this. I had learned to keep it simple. Keep it boring. Make people move on to the next target. Consulting, I said. Mostly retired. I just do it for fun now. She didn't leave. Most people leave the moment they hear for fun. She didn't. We talked for 2 hours that night. She told me she was the CEO of a mid-sized logistics company called Voskor, growing fast, backed by investors, a perfect package. She was sharp, funny in that dry, restrained way I couldn't resist. And she looked at me like I was a puzzle she hadn't solved yet. I should have recognized that look. I've used it myself. Now let's look at what Mildred believed she knew about Robert Hale on that February night. A consultant living comfortably, a decent apartment, sensible shoes, a low-profile personality. But here's the truth. 3 years before I met her, I quietly sold a supply chain software company. It took me 9 years to build. I sold it to a private equity firm in Chicago for a number my accountant still gets nervous saying out loud. No press release, no LinkedIn announcement, no celebration party. I signed the papers, went home to Pacific Heights, ordered a deep dish pizza, and watched a documentary about penguins. That was it. Money that makes noise attracts trouble. I've watched too many men collapse chasing recognition. I learned long ago that the quietest man in the room is often the most dangerous one. Mildred thought she was dating a low-profile consultant. In reality, she was dating a man who held equity in 11 companies. A man who owned real estate across 4 continents through entities she had never even heard of. A man who hadn't told a single person his true net worth in years. But I'm moving too fast. We dated for 14 months. She took me to corporate galas and introduced me as her smart and humble partner, as if I were some kind of expensive handcrafted accessory. I played the role perfectly. Simple khakis, a modest watch. Nothing flashy. My friend Dave pulled me aside at one of those galas about 6 weeks before the wedding. His tie was loosened, his third glass of wine in hand. He had that look on his face. She introduces you like a prop, he said. You know that, right? She's proud of me, Dave. He set his glass down. She introduces the company's Q3 results with more warmth than she introduces you. I laughed it off. Saturday, the 22nd of May, 2021. We got married. A small ceremony. Her idea. Intimate, she called it. Efficient, I thought, but didn't say. 22 guests. The fog hung low over the bay the way it often does on San Francisco mornings. Mornings that can't quite decide whether they're beautiful or just cold. Her investors sent flowers. Expensive ones. I remember thinking, why would investors send wedding flowers? I stored that thought away. I store everything. The first year of our marriage was genuinely good. I say that honestly. Then month 18 arrived. Sunday, the 9th of November 2022. She was at the office again. I was home reviewing investment documents at the kitchen table. We shared a family drive, tax files, insurance, property records. Standard things. I wasn't snooping. I want that clearly understood. I was looking for the renewal of our home insurance policy, and I took a wrong turn into a subfolder labeled Archive. That's where it was. A document titled Exit Strategy, R. My first thought was that it was a very clean font for something that was about to ruin my Sunday. I opened it. I read it twice. Then I sat still for about 4 minutes. If you know me, you'd know that's longer than I sit still for almost anything. 12 pages. Careful. Clinical. Our marriage laid out like an asset management structure. My financial profile, or what she believed it was described as financially dependent, but legally separate. A timeline broken down by year. Year 2, consolidate shared accounts. Year 3, increase her public asset base. Year 5, begin dissolution. And on page 7 there was a name. Brett Calloway. Associate at Voskor. Slicked hair. Firm handshake. He had shaken my hand at 3 different company dinners, always calling me Buddy. Buddy. I closed the laptop. I went into the kitchen. I made handmade pasta from scratch because some situations require the kind of focus that only comes from kneading dough. I opened a bottle of Napa Red. Set 2 place settings at the table. And then I sat there in the quiet kitchen. That's when I realized something worse than betrayal. She hadn't chosen me because of my invisibility. She had chosen me because it was useful. Think about it. No social media presence, no Forbes profile, no ego that demanded public maintenance. A man who sold a company for a number nobody knew and celebrated with pizza and a penguin documentary. In her careful calculation, I was the perfect financial shelter. Her investors had been asking questions about her lifestyle, her spending, her judgment. A quiet, modest husband would neutralize that noise, make an ambitious woman look grounded. I wasn't a partner. I wasn't even really a husband. I was a strategy with a wedding ring. And the most dangerous part was that she was right about everything she believed about me. I was invisible. I was quiet. I was exactly what she had researched. She had just never thought to research what quiet men do when they are underestimated. She came home at 8:47 that night. "Something smells good," she said, setting her handbag by the door. "Pasta," I replied. "Sit down." She sat. We ate. She talked about her day. I talked about mine, the edited version. We drank wine. I cleaned up. We went to bed. And while she slept, I stared at the ceiling. That's when I made a decision. A decision that would take most of the next 2 years to execute. No confrontation. No explosion. No scene. Because here's the truth about a long con. The only way to beat one is with a longer one. Patience, I've learned, is just revenge that hasn't revealed itself yet. Which brings me back to Friday morning, the 13th of April, 2023. The envelope sat there. 11 pages of arrogance. My assets described as unverified and minimal. Minimal. I almost laughed out loud when I read that word. I finished my coffee and set the cup down. Then I picked up my phone and called the one man I should have called 5 months earlier. William Bull Tanner, my lawyer, my old friend. He's sharper than he looks, which is saying something because he looks like the kind of man who argues with referees at his kids' soccer games. "Bull has been with me since my first company," he answered on the second ring. "Bull here." "It's Robert," I said. "I need you in San Francisco, when as soon as possible." That bad, I looked out the window toward the bay. A beautiful Friday morning. The fog was beginning to lift off the water. "No," I said. "It's about to get that good." "What did you find?" "Let's just say someone is playing chess," I said with the man who invented the board. "I'll book a flight tonight," Bull said. Then he hung up. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and looked out over San Francisco on an April morning, gray, beautiful, and completely indifferent to everyone's problems. Mildred thought she had married a modest man living a comfortable life. What she actually married was the most patient man she had ever met. Patience, I've learned, is just revenge that hasn't revealed itself yet. If you've been listening for a while and you want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit the like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but that small action makes a huge difference in keeping this entire channel running. Let me tell you something about patience. Most people think it's passive, quiet, even weak. They're wrong. Patience is the most aggressive action a man can take. It's waking up every morning knowing exactly what's coming and still choosing to wait, choosing to smile, choosing to pour the wine and ask about her day, sitting across the dinner table from a woman who has already saved your exit strategy in a hidden folder and not flinching. Not once. That's not weakness. That's war. Bull Tanner landed at SFO the next morning right after she dropped that agreement on the kitchen table. The first Saturday of April 2023. He looked like he had slept on the plane. Because he had. He walked into my office in the financial district carrying a stack of legal papers and a gas station coffee. He wore the expression of a man who already knew this was going to be interesting. The office was small. 1 desk. 2 chairs. A window with a view that wasn't particularly impressive. I paid the rent in cash through a management company Mildred had never heard of. She believed my office was the kitchen table at home. That was the point. Bull sat down, took a sip of the terrible coffee, looked at me and said, "All right, talk." And I did. The entire story. The meeting in 2020. 14 months of dating. The wedding in 2021. The moment I found the file in November 2022. The name Brett Calloway on page 7, the 5-year timeline. And the postnuptial agreement that had just landed on my kitchen table like a grenade with a law firm's logo on it. Bull didn't interrupt. Which is rare for Bull. The man interrupts judges. When I finished, he set his coffee down, leaned back in his chair, and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "She wrote the whole thing down," he finally said. 12 pages, I replied. He looked straight at me. "That's either extremely arrogant Or extremely stupid. Both, I said. And that's exactly what we're going to use. He picked up the stack of legal papers. What do you want? I slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. He read it. His eyebrows rose slowly the way Bull Tanner does when he sees something genuinely new. You've been holding on to this since November, he asked. 5 months, Bull. I've had time to think. This is going to take time to execute. She gave us her own timeline. Year 5. We've got runway. He looked at the paper again. Then he did something I had never seen in 15 years of working together. He smiled. All right, he said. Let's build something. We started the following Monday morning. The first step was a new holding entity. Bull registered it in Delaware over the weekend. We called it Harland Ridge LLC. A clean, boring name. The kind of name that makes accountants yawn and lawyers stop reading. Boring names often hide interesting things. I learned that building my first company. The first move through Harland Ridge was the most important one. 12% of Voskor. Her company. Her pride and joy. The thing she talked about at every dinner, every gala, sometimes even first thing in the morning. The center of her entire 5-year plan. The asset she was most determined to protect from me. I bought it quietly. Through Harland Ridge, through a secondary holding company connected to Harland Ridge the way a shadow connects to a man. It only appears if you know exactly where the light is coming from. She never looked for that light. Bull broke the purchase into 3 separate acquisitions, so no single transaction triggered public reporting flags. Clean, invisible, boring on paper. About 8 weeks after she dropped that agreement on the kitchen table, I quietly owned a piece of the very company she was planning to protect from me. That night she cooked dinner for me. She called me the man she loved most. I told her she was always full of surprises. She had no idea how right she was. The quietest man in the room is often the most dangerous. And I wasn't just quiet. I was becoming the foundation beneath her feet. Every step she took now rested on my ground. And she was still smiling at the trap she thought she had built for me. This is the part people usually don't understand when I tell this story. They expect me to say that I changed, that I became cold, that I stopped caring. I didn't. I still cooked dinner. I still remembered anniversaries. We still walked through the Presidio on Sunday mornings just like we always had. I asked about her board meetings with what sounded like genuine interest, because the moment I changed would have been the moment everything collapsed. Mildred could read a room the way most people read large print books. Effortlessly. Instantly. So I gave her nothing to read. I smiled. I showed up. I poured the wine. And every Saturday morning I drove to the financial district and quietly dismantled everything she believed she had built around me. No one ever said revenge had to look like revenge. Sometimes it looks exactly like a happy marriage. If you've been listening this far, do us a quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without doing it, and it doesn't cost you anything, but it means a lot to us. By that summer, I started targeting the logistics network. She complained about vendors constantly during dinner. The contract in Fresno is bleeding us dry. The carrier in Chicago can't hit their last-mile delivery targets. She talked and talked. I nodded. I sympathized. I refilled her wine. And I took notes. 2 of Voskor's largest transport vendors were operating on razor-thin margins, quietly looking for capital partners. 1 in Phoenix, 1 in New Jersey. I bought minority stakes in both, not controlling shares. Nothing loud. Just enough presence at the table when contract renewals came up. Just enough so that when Mildred's team sat down to renegotiate terms, the people across from them reported through several layers of intermediaries directly to me. She was negotiating against people who worked for her husband. I won't pretend that didn't feel satisfying. I'm still human. That fall Bull called me one Thursday morning. No greeting. Brett Calloway, he said. I set my coffee down. Go on. He's running a private investment fund on the side. Small. Quiet. He's looking for someone to anchor the second round. Quiet. My favorite word in the English language. How much I asked. $2 million to anchor it, Bull said. He'd take less. From the right partner. Then become the right partner, I said. Keep it far away from me, Bull. At least 3 layers of separation. He cannot know it's me. I paused. Robert, I added, he's called me buddy to my face 3 times. Another pause. I want 4 layers, Bull. Bull actually laughed. For the first time in months, 4 layers, he said. Understood. By early winter, I had quietly become a limited partner in Brett Calloway's private investment fund. The same Brett Calloway whose name appeared on page 7 of my wife's exit strategy. The same man who had shaken my hand at 3 corporate dinners and called me buddy. Now he was doing business with me, and he had absolutely no idea. Take a moment to appreciate that. By January 2024, this is what the chessboard looked like. Harland Ridge held 12% of Voscor. 2 of her company's largest logistics vendors were operating on my capital. Brett Calloway's fund was anchored by Robert Hale, hidden behind 4 legal layers. And Mildred was having the best business quarter of her career. Voscor was growing. Her board was happy. Her investors were patient. She had no idea that the foundation beneath everything she had built now had a different owner. She was standing on my floor calling it her house. Friday, the 13th of April, 2024. Exactly 1 year after she placed that envelope on my kitchen table. Everything's in position, Bull said when he called at 9:00 a.m. You want me to start sending the response documents? Not a response, I said. A revelation. I want her lawyers to sit down when they open it. I want the senior partner to stand up and close his office door. Give me 3 weeks. You've got 2. 2 weeks later, Bull walked into my office carrying 47 pages. He set them on the desk like he was holding something that might explode. I read every page, slowly, carefully. That everything I asked. Everything Bull said. 11 tech investments. 3 unicorn valuations. Real estate across 4 continents. The logistics network, both suppliers fully documented. Harland Ridge's 12% stake in Voscor. And the Calloway Fund. All 4 layers traceable back to you legally. I looked down at the document. 47 pages. Her agreement had been 11. She brought a knife. I came back with an entire kitchen. Send it, I said. The response came a few days later. Not from Mildred. From her lead attorney, Gary Ostroff, a senior partner with 23 years in family law. A man whose reputation suggested he had seen absolutely everything. Bull told me the call lasted 6 minutes. Ostroff spoke the way people do when every word feels like a step across thin ice. Mr. Tanner, he said carefully, your client's assets appear to be considerably larger than we previously understood. Yes, Bull replied. They are. Would Mr. Hale like to reconsider the terms of the postnuptial agreement? Bull looked across the desk at me. I shook my head once. The terms are hers, I said quietly. Mr. Hale won't change a single word. There was a long silence. I see Ostroff finally said, I'll be in touch. Bull hung up and looked at me. How do you feel, he asked. I thought about a Sunday evening in November of 2022. A clean font on a document that had never been meant for my eyes. A ceiling I had stared at while the woman beside me slept peacefully dreaming about year 5. I stood up and put on my coat. I'm hungry, I said. Let's go to Clement Street. Good food there. There's a moment in every long game when the board shifts. Not dramatic. No explosions. No speeches. No one flipping the table. Just a quiet, irreversible tilt. Like a ship that has already decided to sink, but hasn't told the passengers yet. That moment came a few days after Ostroff's call. I wasn't there when he called Mildred, but Bull had a friend at Ostroff's firm. That friend said the senior partner closed his office door, sat down, and didn't come out for 40 minutes. 40 minutes. I've been in enough negotiations to know what 40 minutes behind a closed door means. It means the numbers don't match what you thought they would. It means someone has made a very expensive mistake. It means the game is over. Patience, I've learned, is simply revenge that hasn't revealed itself yet. Mildred came home early that Wednesday afternoon. That was the first sign. This was a woman who treated the office as her official address and our house in Pacific Heights as a hotel she happened to have emotional ties to. But she was there. No blazer, no open laptop, no phone in her hand, just sitting. I knew immediately. But I didn't let it show on my face. Hey, I said, setting my keys on the shelf. You're home early. She looked at me for a long moment. Really looked, the way she had in the beginning, like I was a puzzle she hadn't solved yet. Gary called, she said. Your lawyer? Yes. I opened the refrigerator and grabbed a bottle of water, slowly unscrewed the cap. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Robert," Mildred exhaled slowly, the way people do when they've been carrying something heavy for hours and their body finally gives up. "Harland Ridge," she said. I turned back and leaned against the kitchen counter, looking at her. "What about it? You know what it is." Silence filled the kitchen. Outside, San Francisco kept moving like nothing had happened. Cars on Broadway. A dog barking somewhere down the block. The distant horn of a ship out on the bay. The world was continuing normally. "How long?" she asked. Her voice was steady. I'll give her that. Even while collapsing, Mildred didn't break easily. "How long what?" I folded my arms and looked at the woman I had shared a bed with for 3 years. The woman who had filed our marriage like a business acquisition and stored it in an archive folder. "Since November 2022, I said. She closed her eyes. Just for a second. Long enough for me to see the calculations racing behind them. "That file," she said quietly. "That file," I repeated. Silence again. Longer this time. "You never said anything," she said. "Neither did you." She stood slowly and walked to the window, turning her back to me as she looked down at the street below. I let her stand there. I wasn't in a hurry. I hadn't been in a hurry for 17 months. "How much do you have?" she finally asked without turning around. It wasn't really a question. It was the sound of a woman doing math and not liking the result. "More than your lawyer thinks," I said. She turned back toward me, and for the first time I saw something I didn't expect. Not anger, not calculation, something raw, something human. For a brief moment she looked less like a strategist and more like a person. "What do you really want, Robert?" she asked quietly. "What do you actually want?" I looked at her and thought about the real answer, not the legal one. What had I wanted? I had wanted a real marriage. I had wanted the woman I met at that mixer in 2020. The one who laughed before I finished the joke. The one who asked honest questions. But that woman had been a performance, and you can't reclaim something that never existed. "Nothing beyond what you offered," I said. "The postnuptial agreement stands exactly as written. Your terms. Every word." She stared at me, waiting for the trap. "You're holding 12% of my company," she said. "That's right. And the suppliers," she said. "And Brett." 4 layers of separation, I replied. "But yes." She slowly shook her head. "Not out of anger? Out of disbelief?" "You built all of that?" she asked. "While living here, while having dinner with me, while walking through the Presidio on Sunday mornings like everything was fine." "You planned year 5, I said. "I planned the entire board." She was silent for a long time. Long enough for the fog from the bay to drift in slow and indifferent, covering everything it touched. When she spoke again, her voice had regained its composure. The CEO was back. The controlled version of Mildred I knew. But her eyes were different. "I underestimated you," she said. I held her gaze. "Yes," I said. "You did." She nodded once, picked up her handbag, and walked out of the kitchen. A moment later, I heard the front door close. I stood by the window for a while, looking down at the same street she had just been watching. It didn't feel like victory. Not exactly. It felt more like something that should have ended differently from the beginning. She came with a knife. I came back with an entirely different kitchen. The formal divorce proceedings began the following week. Bull and Gary Ostroff sat across from each other in a conference room on the 34th floor of a building in San Francisco's financial district, 3 blocks from my quiet Saturday office. I felt a small private satisfaction about that. The agreement Mildred had drafted protected everything she had publicly declared: her real estate, her personal accounts, her listed Voscor shares. But it said nothing about Harland Ridge, nothing about the logistics suppliers, nothing about the Callaway Fund. Because she had written that agreement in a world where Robert Hale was just a modest consultant with minimal assets. She protected herself from the man she thought she had married. She had no protection from the man she had actually married. Bull later told me Ostroff sat there like someone trying to solve a puzzle, after half the pieces had quietly been replaced. "Your client's agreement is very solid," Bull told him pleasantly. "All assets she listed are fully protected." "And Mr. Hale's assets?" Ostroff asked. "Not listed," Bull replied. therefore not subject to the agreement. Ostroff had no answer. Neither did Mildred. The papers were signed on a Tuesday morning in late May of 2024. I moved out of the Pacific Heights house that same week. 2 movers. I took what belonged to me and left everything that belonged to her, exactly where she had placed it. Clean. Efficient. She probably would have appreciated the efficiency if it hadn't been happening to her. I rented an apartment in the Marina District, 15th floor. A view of the bay and the bridge, the whole city spread out in glittering indifference, as if it were quietly showing off. That first night I stood by the window with a glass of Napa red wine. For the first time in nearly 2 years I felt something new. Not happiness, not triumph, just quiet. Like a room after a long noise finally stops and you suddenly realize how loud it had been the entire time. The Voskhor board of directors called an emergency meeting. Harlan Ridge's 12% stake was now public. It sent ripples through the investment community. Institutional investors, the same ones who sent wedding flowers back in 2021, suddenly requested formal discussions. They weren't celebrating a marriage, they were protecting their investments. By the end of the summer, the Voskhor board contacted Bull. They were looking for stability. Harlan Ridge's position demanded respect, and they wanted to offer me a formal role. I called Bull. "Tell them I'll take the chairman's seat," I said. "Not a fixed role. Chairman. Join our community by hitting like and subscribing to hear more real, raw stories about family. And as always, thank you for being part of this space." I looked out across the bay from the Marina apartment. The Golden Gate Bridge glowed through the late fog. Just business, I told myself. On a Sunday morning in September 2024, I read the announcement of my chairmanship in the business section. Good espresso. Nobody knew who I was. That was still my favorite part. Dave called at 1:00 a.m. I saw the announcement, he said. "Morning, Dave. Robert," he paused. "I told you. You told me she was a woman with a plan," I said. "And I told you that plan might not be the one you think." "You were right," I said. "So what now?" "Now I finish my coffee, Dave. That's all. I built what I built. Protected what I protected. She made her choices. And you're okay." I thought about that December night with the untouched glass of wine. The ceiling I stared at. The pasta I cooked for 2, while a 12-page document sat 1 meter away. I thought about what I had wanted and what I received instead, and how sometimes those 2 things combine into something you can live with. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay." And this time I meant it.